Hello, how y'all doing? My name is Burke. I'm your host for another episode of Free TV, and today we're going to start a series called Core Heathen Concepts. And our first video is going to be about WYRD, W-Y-R-D, and it is cognate with the modern English word weird. They come from the same place. And in the Old Norse sources, this appears as WYRD, U-R-D, and another word that is associated with that is orlog. You see that in a lot of places associated with the world tree and the Norns. This prefix, this sound in weird, urd, and orlog, they all come from the same Proto-Germanic source, and you see it today in modern German with urd, like the site, which would be the ancient time, in the present tense being verb, werden. The Norns we're going to talk about later. Verdandi, this is very similar, it's the same thing. And skuld, which means debt, and it's cognate of should. So these concepts that are often translated as fate are not fate at all. It's a distinct Germanic concept in that these things are not static. And that's why you see the Norns, who guide weird, who dispense the flow of weird and are responsible for that, often depicted as weavers. And this is most strikingly depicted in the Old Norse poem Daranthaljóð in Njálssaga. And it's about the Battle of Clontarf, which will be important because we will weave that back into the narrative later. But in the Daranthaljóð, the Valkyries there, who are akin to the Norns, the Disir, all these women who are in charge of the kin line, our individual kin lines and our collective kin lines as tribes, nations, this sort of thing. These women are depicted as weaving this tapestry of battle with heads, severed heads for the loom weights, spear shafts, the shuttles or arrows, and the warp and the woof are comprised of men's intestines. So it's a very gory scene, but it also illustrates how our ancestors thought of these things as being woven out in the tapestry of urd, orlog, or weird. And so these things come back into play with something that a lot of you guys have seen if you've watched The Last Kingdom or if you're widely read, which is WYRD befullerade. And again, I'm from Texas. It's kind of difficult for me to speak English correctly, so if I mispronounce something, feel free to correct me. But WYRD befullerade basically means that weird is, it's a given counsel, and that cognate arrayed is with read. You'll see that a lot, like in a Bundesrat, still in Germany with the government. They talk about this, that this is a council that people have to decide things. So that means that weird is already decided. Another one that you will see in Beowulf is Geth a weird sva hill skill, which means that weird goes as she should. And it's important in understanding the malleability of that concept of weird, in that that last element, scale, is a cognate of should or shall. And again, it is related to debt, what shall be owed, what shall be paid. And so these appear, largely today we're familiar with WYRD befullerade from The Last Kingdom with Uhtred, but it is from the Old English poem The Wanderer, and of course the second one, Geth a weird, his scale, is from Beowulf. And these things tie in back with the Battle of Clontarf. When you see the Weird Sisters in Shakespeare, realize that these things carried down with the Norse. And yes, the Old English had their own Germanic version with the weird, the actual word, but urd came down, and this shared tradition, it survives all the way in the British Isles from Ireland and Dublin, the Battle of Clontarf, down through the Orkneys, Scotland, and into England today. And so that's why we have this tradition of weird. So WYRD began shortly after creation. The Voluspa talks about Ask and Embla found on the shore by Odin, Vili, and Ve, and how they didn't have any Megan, and there were Orlogslos, which means they didn't have any Orlog, or what we would consider as WYRD. So with the Norse creation that we will deal with in a later video, you have the Ginnunga Gap where there's nothing, you have Muspel, the land of fire, and you have Niflheim, the land of ice, and they form together, they energize each other, work off each other, and life is created in the gap. And so before this, obviously, Ginnunga Gap, there is nothing. But as life forms, you have the cow, you have Ymir, you have those descendants, and at some point between Ymir and the gods, the Norns arise, and they arise at the foot of the tree amongst the roots, and one of these wells at the three roots is the Well of WYRD. And so the Norns govern the Well of WYRD. And the idea, the picture that our ancestors painted for us were these three Norns who every day at the well of the tree watered the tree, and they spread out the life-giving clay. Every day they poured out onto the roots of the tree the water from the Well of WYRD, and that water rose up through the tree and went out into the leaves, and the deeds that men did in the world, the gods, men, all creatures did in the world, fell down back into the well as drops of dew. And so it was a cycle that repeated over and over. And so you can look at this in a collective sense, or you can look at this in an individual sense. And we will talk about both of these in another episode about the well and the tree, and how that can also be the man in the tree as an individual and as a community. But one example that we use when we explain this, particularly in my kindred, is that the Well of WYRD for an individual, although it is tied, you are born with your WYRD, it can be influenced by your deeds. And so if you do a bad deed, you could think of that as having an ink dropper and setting an ink dropper into this water. And if you just have a little cup like you are when you're first starting out in life, and you drop some black ink in there, and you look at it, it's very dark, you don't want to drink this, this is bad stuff. And yet if you continue to do good deeds, conscientiously doing good deeds, building good WYRD, and putting clean water into that well, over time, that ink drop, that bad WYRD, will be overcome, and you will have good WYRD. Now, the idea of the Norns and Orlog and this WYRD that's being dispensed from the tree goes back to the names of the Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld. Urd, from where we get Orlog, means that which has been or that which has occurred in the past. Verdandi means that which is becoming. So that's what's going on right now. And Skuld is often mistranslated as meaning future, but it doesn't mean future at all. What it means is debt, what will be owed, or, going back to the early example from the Old English, what shall be paid. And so our ancestors looked at things as being interconnected and being very dynamic. And that's another reason why you have this dual idea of the Norns being weavers, because they weave this tapestry of life. And you have the warp and the woof, these threads going different ways, and they go back and forth, putting more into the tapestry. And so if you think of a physical tapestry, where if you were weaving it, you could move it over here or move it over there, our ancestors had this concept within the idea of WYRD that a strong person could bend those threads one way or another by exerting their will to achieve what they wanted to achieve within the bounds of that tapestry. And that's very instructive to us today, because if we pay what is owed to WYRD and we look and we properly see the layout of the real world, Verdandi, if you will, then we can use the force of our will, or our Hemingia. We will get into this in further videos. But we can bend that tapestry to our will, not in any necessarily magical sense of the word, but as a person who looks at the world and say, hey, here are these X, Y, and Z conditions of the world, and if I apply myself to this consciously and work my will in the world, I can achieve these things. And so that's why this is a very important concept to us as modern heathens, as it was to our ancestors. So as you can see, this is a very complex subject, but it's a very central subject to heathenry and to the worldview of our ancestors. And we will come back to it later and discuss it in more depth. But right now, with this Core Heathen Concept series, what we want to do is put some core heathen concepts out there with a little bit of explanation to get everyone on the same page, so that after this is done, we can take off and explore some more advanced concepts. So we hope that you enjoyed this video, and we're looking forward to bringing you more things, more content creation on this channel. So go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and comment, give us your ideas on this. And if you have any ideas for further videos, let us know. As we say down here in Texas, skål, y'all.